All right. Well, I've said this on almost every live stream, and it's dumb, but I don't want to break it because I'm a little bit repetitive. But I think we're live. So yeah, here we are. Good to see you,
I'm alive.
boys.
I don't know about you guys.
No, live, not
Oh,
a
live. Oh,
live.
sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
delineable
Sorry.
there for
Yeah,
sure.
gotcha
So
now.
let us know you're here in the chat. Let us know if you can hear us in the chat, please. It says we're live, but we never know. So I always like to validate that. So if you're here, please say hello.
Mine says
Slagle,
pre-live.
what's that? Yours says pre-live.
Yes. Oh, hold on. It says click to join. Checking it.
Okay,
Oh, we
fair.
got us. We got us. Okay, let me get
Yeah,
out of here
maybe.
before we
I
get
don't know.
feedback. I
Maybe
gotta
I
get
should.
out. We
I
gotta
don't
get out
know.
before I get feedback. Okay, I got it. Oh, no, I didn't.
Well,
Crap.
that is an inauspicious start as usual. So here we
Yep,
find ourselves.
you got it. We're live.
All right, for
Have
realsy
confirmed.
though. Yeah, can confirm live in here. A funny story, real quick, before we get started, Jason. I was working with the production crew at PAX 8. This is like 90 episodes again. What up, Knox? 90 episodes ago. And I started getting feedback in my ears. And so during that, the way that structure is, I can talk to the producers and let them know, hey, I have feedback in my ears. Like through the chat, I'm letting them know, and I'm dying because I hear myself 6 seconds later for like the first 26 minutes of this show. And it was just blowing my brain up. It is very hard to focus. And it turned out I had YouTube open in another tab. I was listening to myself with the YouTube delay, and I was getting all mad with the team. And I'm like, fix this. And I'm an idiot. It's okay. But
It's like
yeah,
when people call into radio stations and they're like, turn your radio off. Turn your radio off.
right. I was that guy. No, 100% I was that guy. Much love, Henry. Great to see you, brother. Knox is here. Thank you for letting us know we're live. Henry, good to see you, buddy. Congrats on the upcoming award. It's super awesome to see you, my man. All right, what are we here for? Slagle and Robert, what are we here to talk about today?
Yes.
Us.
Okay.
Cyberrise.
Cyberrise.
Yeah. Cyberrise. Oh,
Cyberrise is the
Cyberrise. Oh, yeah,
discussion.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cyberrise.
I
Cyberrise.org.
I want to kind of do this as just a bit of an update, also as a bit of call to action. If you're not already in our Patreon, find us on Patreon, patreon.com/cyberrise. And there's a free tier. You can join us. We're going to have a private AMA after this where you can ask your questions and we'd be glad to answer them or just hang out with us. But I want to start with a reinforcement of what is Cyberrise, where were we born, and where are we going? I was instructed that it was left a little unclear last time we did this from the CompTIA GTI angle, and I'd love to close that bridge a little bit. So what are we? We started as a brilliant idea of Robert Chaffee's. How many years ago now? Whatever,
It was
2021, sometime ish.
2021. Yes.
Yeah, as a result of your event. And, MJ Shore jumped on it almost instantly, right? From CompTIA. He said, listen, we'd be glad to put in whatever kind of protections, because there's a lot of fear of helping somebody else in that scenario of subrogation, of risk from the client themselves. Like there's just challenges that we needed some protections from.
Yeah. And this, Matt, just to clarify, was the MSP911.org idea that I had, was to be able to provide services to fellow MSPs going through a security event, to provide services to them so that they didn't feel like they were going through it alone, whether that was coaching or some technical help or whatever. I mean, ultimately, I wanted to replicate the help that we received, which was physical boots on the ground, people like getting on planes and coming to assist me.
Let's speak to that. That was one of the limitations in the very beginning when we first started down this road, that CompTIA's legal team said, we just can't. We can't provide direct services. And that should have been a Johnny foreshadowing to us. Right, Jason? Like, anyways, can't provide direct services. And there's a reason for it. They're a 501c6. And a 501c6 cannot do that in the trade industry that they're in. And I'm oversimplifying for lack of not wanting to spend a whole bunch of time explaining what the attorneys spend a lot of time explaining. But ultimately, we spent a year and a half, would you say, Robert, delivering those services to about 25 or so end MSPs going through some of their worst times. Just to let that sink in if you're in the audience, how many that is. I mean, that's 25 of your peers that some of them literally closed shop. That one hit really hard later.
And by the way, Matt, that's 25-ish people who, one of them, by the way, did close shop. So I have a little story there if we have time for that. But she reached out to me to let me know that she decided to ultimately close her business. I was heartbroken when I got that text message. But and that was those 25 callers, that rang our line asking for help with very
Yep.
little public relations on our part,
Sure.
right? We like kind of just through word of mouth started to spread this around, and it
We
just
did
goes
have
to show you what
friends.
the sheer number could
Yeah.
really
We did
do.
have friends.
Yeah, like Huntress was sending
Huntress.
people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's true. Yes.
Yeah. People that cared about their partners ultimately found how to get them to us to help out. This is
Mhm.
kind of the best way I would say it, right? We had several of those. But to your point, Robert, we kept doing that. And as we tried to get requests to get email addresses to separate our risks so that we weren't functioning on pax8.com or in Jason's case, CNWR, or Robert, in your case, right? Progressive computing. So we were asking for those things. They just weren't happening. And we just didn't know why. And so we called MJ and we had a meeting about it. And MJ dug in and pretty rapidly came back and said, yeah, Matt, we do have something we need to fix and make better. And what it basically was is that we could easily exist as a 501c3, but not under the SIX umbrella. And so that meant that we needed to exist separately. They might philanthropically fund that, which we have yet to necessarily figure out fully how that plays out. But they did help us get off the ground. They paid for the attorneys, which comes into some of our challenges that we've actually dealt with on our own accord from our own stupidity. Paid for our attorneys and got us through that process. And we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for GTIA. So at least at this current status, the initial vision was to spin out and exist there. We don't intend to do any. Go ahead, Robert.
No, I was going to say we need to make that abundantly clear. It's not like they kicked us out. They were like,
Right.
guys, we have this,
Yeah.
problem together. And here, and actually, it was MJ who, suggested that why don't you
It was
guys spin
brilliant.
out and we'll fund it, right? Like so that you guys aren't, left out in the cold, which was brilliant and generous of him and them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's gave us an opportunity as just three humans talking this through to go, I've been wanting to do something like this, right? And we want to continue MSP 911, but we weren't really sure what that was, right? And what we planned on doing with it. And so I'm going to share a visual real quick that we can all kind of just talk about.
Yeah.
But what we came to was that Cyberrise could be a parent entity that ultimately manages programs that would not exist in capitalism. There's not a capitalistic reward for the things, at least not immediately, for those things. And what we also realize is the things we might take on are higher risk. They're around incident response. They're around boots on ground. Like there's a lot of risk in sending humans to go touch stuff during people in the middle of something, right? There's challenges there. And so what we realized we could be is a giant insurance vehicle, governance vehicle, structure vehicle, guidance vehicle, and oversight vehicle for programs that need to exist. Meaning that if you have a program at some point as we get our things where they need to be, we're going to take on RFP type things for what next program we should boot up. We're going to figure out how do we get the right density of humans involved so that it continues and it's successful. We've all been involved in things that just don't work, right? I've created some of them.
Yeah. Well, and I think to that point, right, like the reason we started with this 3, and really, honestly, it's 1 at the moment, right?
Yeah,
like the biggest,
yeah.
The mapping stuff is continuing, right? But like almost all the effort is in 1, which is the MSP 911 right now. And the reason is I often see things like this, nonprofits spin up or groups, and they try to boil the ocean, right? Like they try to do everything all at once. And as a result, nothing gets done, right? So one of the things that we discussed when we met was being very selective and making sure we do the things we choose to take on, the diligence, and give them the attention they need to actually be successful before we go moving on to other things.
Yeah. Another thing to add to that is we also want a structure where we're not the ones running the program that exists. For example, the reason Jason feels and is correct that framework mapping is moving along, which we'll introduce this here in just a second, is because Bob Miller and Stephen Kellogg run it along with Veronica, and she makes me show up and do the things I have to do that are tied to the actual fiscal responsibility I have that's associated with it, right? So that one's happening. But in much the same way, we have a volunteer potentially when we are ready to spin up the hackening to go and own what is going to be mostly relationship management between universities and pen testing companies and practitioners and people that don't want to burn TTPs but do want to educate the students on what things are. And that role's a very special role that needs to be that. And I don't volunteer to be that human ever. That's kind of the goals. I don't want to be a director, nor does Jason. I think you and Robert, we've decided as board members, we're probably not going to be directors.
If we can't find one for that, I would potentially do it. But if I think that the preference would be to find somebody that is very passionate about it, that can put the time in.
Well, and I have some people in mind for this. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
No, I was going to say almost what you're saying now is that we've had so many people raise their hand and ask how to help. How do I help? How do I help? Right. Well, we're finally getting to that point very soon where we're going to say, okay, well, here's a program. You want to help?
Yep.
Well, lead it, right? Be the director of it, because we can't. The three of us can't be all things to all needs here. It's just impossible. Well, we're going to fail.
Exactly. I think what the first ask really is if you were involved in the initial MSP 911 initiative, which you know who you are, we know who you are. I'd love for you to kind of raise your hand if you're seeing this and let us know that you're still interested. We're going to be making a call to action to that. Jason, that's one of your tasks that got
Yep.
usurped by unfortunateness of life that is our world. Yeah, I'd say the Chris Lairs, the Jay Tiptons, you know who you are out there. I guess I could name all of them. But
Yeah, or come find us next week at Right a Boom if you happen. Like, be sure to glad to chat there.
Because we are insured. That is actually the next thing I'll call out is that we are insured. And also, I'll just talk a little bit about our structure. Hey, Chica, how are you? One of the things that we wanted to do from the beginning is look at this from a technical perspective of separation of duties, separation of function. And so we have a Microsoft tenant that lives here that runs our world. But we have multi-tenant organizations that sponsor each of these that allows us to keep complete segmentation, those type of things as well. But it also allows us to spin those organizations off later if we needed to into separate organizations. So that was just a little bit of maybe too much information for general public, but just sharing. Yeah. So to what was the next thing I was going to move on to? Somebody?
Well, I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about the hackening, and we've talked a little bit about MSP 911. What's the third pillar there? If you want to talk about
that, sure. So let's in fact, I'll just revamp. So the hackening is Jason Slagle and I and several others, Tom Lawrence and you know, I don't want to miss any names, but John Hammond, a few others, decided to kind of take on this data centric project of looking at MSPs. They signed up for a pen test. We did various degrees of pen testing or not against them, but for all of them, including Robert Chaffee sitting here right now, we did OSINT enumeration. Yeah, you did. We did OSINT enumeration. We did digging on what we could figure out that you held as host names, what kind of host name health those were under, whether you owned them or they were C names, that kind of stuff, like lots of that. But out of it, we realized like some of the stuff that works in the lab doesn't work in real life. And sometimes students walk away with an unfair understanding of what they're going to see. And maybe we could create a program that partnered students in their senior years exiting into pen testing and other careers, a program where the capstone project of looking at Robert for 7 months and trying to do things and then writing it up and having their report graded by pen testing companies as a way to work on the workforce development. So I would say the hackening is very workforce development centered is what its actual value is going to be, but it'll also help the MSPs by allowing you to have potentially free pen tests and decent ones as a result. And then the framework mapping is something that was born in the capitalistic side of things in some ways, but has been something that's being allowed to exist under this charity as a form of keeping it industry valuable. What this is that myself and Veronica Dombieva and about 30 or so other humans that might be on this call or watching or not got together and started taking a way to break apart frameworks into their taxonomical elements so that you could measure those elements to see if a tool helps meet those elements. Doesn't mean it does it. It just means it's capable. Is that a scalpel or a fat spreader? That kind of stuff, right? So, Jason, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, that's the big thing there, right? Is the test. Just because a product can do it doesn't mean it does it out of the box, and that is a huge distinction.
Or even that it's the best tool. Yeah. Or even that it's the best
will tell you it can do it, but it
That's
may
right.
not do it without a bunch of the
So-
RMM can do almost all of it,
Right.
but it doesn't.
And so what we try to do is more scientifically. I mean, only in the sense that why is that a stegosaurus? Because it has like a thumpy tail and the weird back things, and it's kind of fat and squatty, right? Like that's what we're doing.
Okay, so
Doesn't
if I glue
mean
those on my stegosaurus.
yeah, pretty much. Like at least the AI, you're 90% of the way there.
Jason. I've never heard of stegosaurus.
The confidence scores get higher as you put the things on and lean down, though, as I understand. So the framework mapping is basically creating a map of what tools in the universe are capable of doing the macro aspects of 153 safeguards of CIS. PAX 8's using that as part of the Creative Commons. I think it's a BY, Jason, right? The BY license that allows them to be commercially viable as long as they give reference. And so anybody else that wants to use it can use it for that purpose, ultimately hoping to build what tools should I be at least looking at? And then someone else can build the how should it be configured, as you're seeing in some other places. But we want to provide that as something under the charity that has the protection of that and that isn't as commercially manipulatable because someone paid for more sponsorship and wants to be mapped right. That's kind of the point of this infrastructure. So
I think that segues us into potentially the next part of the discussion, which is finance stuff.
Yeah, let's do it. Hit it. I'll start off with the one that I know, which is we went down the path of Patreon. And Jason, maybe you'll speak to that before I get into the numbers.
Yeah, so I started thinking about one of the things that's important to me is that we aren't beholden to funding sources from one or two large organizations, right? Because a problem that I have seen over and over again and that I know exists is the more money and more dependency you get on one organization, the more influence they tend to have over your direction and a whole bunch of other things. And I wanted to avoid that. One of the ways that I thought we could avoid that is some sort of crowdsourced funding model, right? Where we have the ability, and we will for sure take bigger, donations from corporate entities, right? But I think that the long-term goal is, and Robert can speak to this in a minute, is to not have any one funding source be more than 30%. So the nice thing about using something like Patreon is that, you can micro donate, right? Like we have monthly levels going, I think 5, 10, and 20 at some point. We need to make stickers.
Free.
20, you get stickers and free.
Which I have started working on the sticker project. Actually, I stole some Matt Fox time from Tom Lawrence. So if he invoices you, just tell me, please. Yeah. But I got some stuff coming. I'm excited about that
budget.
Club.
Wait a minute.
No, I did it in Matt points. Those are free.
So it's a good way for the community and the MSPs and other things to basically give back. And I see they're up to 239, 217 paid members, and we'll be doing updates and posts there primarily. And at some point there will likely be some posts that are gated behind some behind the scenes type stuff that's gated behind one of the paid levels, and then there's. We're trying to think of other unique ways where we can give our time or other things that don't have a large amount of cost to them in exchange for donations back from people.
Yep. And speaking of donations, I just want to maybe cut back over here. Let me see if I can change this screen really quickly. I'm going to replace it with screen share. Bear with me, y'all. Windows. If I was a good producer, we'd already have all this done. Threat Captain was nice enough, gracious enough to sponsor $5,000 to pay our first insurance for the first year and some of our startup costs and things. So we do have at least a straight up shout out to Threat Captain and team. Obviously, in this case, they donated, but horrible people could donate. So I'm not speaking towards that, but I also love those people. So they're great. I love Brad and team, and they were awesome. We also have a volunteer from one of those humans to help run some of that because he's already very affiliated with the South Carolina University community and would be able to bring that almost immediately to the hackening. So he's offered to be the program director of that as we get to launch that potentially. So just wanted to call that out that we do have a donor that has covered our insurance. The first insurance, Robert, what was that cost? It was like $3,000 something.
Like 30. It was a low $3,000 mark. I can't remember the exact number. It was like 31, I think, somewhere in that number. But yeah, I mean, a double shout out to Threat Captain for their generosity. We're not here pitching this to for everybody to start throwing money at us. I think Jason's whole idea of like, look, give what you can, even if it's a tiny amount, like small amount. Everybody can do that, but certainly we're going to be getting more organized here. We're in the process of doing that so that we can reach out to organizations that want to see something a little bit more substantive than just a Patreon page up and more of an exact pitch. What are we going to be doing with this money? Because obviously, we're going to be accountable to the community to deliver results, to deliver services, to deliver outcomes. And, we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we are managing those funds correctly.
Yep.
And by the way, I just want to make a note in here that the way we wrote our charter is that we cannot benefit financially at all. So
not even a coffee.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. like if somebody wants to fly me out somewhere to um, give a presentation, I can't have CyberEyes cover any of those costs.
Correct.
So either that group's going to cover it, or I'm paying for it out of my own
Not to
pocket.
say we can't use those funds to sponsor others doing it. It is strictly because we were the founders, the way we've written it as board members, we can't touch it in the way that we're structured.
And so we you
But
know,
we could
we
help
felt
the
like, and
mission
listen,
other
we're all
ways.
comfortable financially in our own personal universes. So, you know, we just wanted to be transparent about that. Like, this is, you know, we plan on maximizing what we can do with those dollars to have the maximum impact on the community at large.
This question. So this is and we are going to have a private AMA. If you're in the Patreon, feel free to jump in. We'll just chat directly with you in a Zoom meeting after this at 45 after. The link's in the Patreon chat there. But ultimately, plans for Europe. I'm going to be honest. I only have the breadth and division of the United States right now in my mind. If you know, at least North America in general, Canada and the United States. Not to say that as we find programs, there's not a reason we would extend beyond the borders. We've had enough troubles already just getting through the state of Chicago or the state of Illinois, maybe state of Chicago, but the state of Illinois challenges with our structure and how we're. Anyways, I'm not ready to go to Europe yet, y'all.
So honestly, the hackening would be pretty easy to run in the Europe if we could get
sure.
somebody there to do it. The mapping stuff, mapping to a different framework other than CIS,
applies anywhere.
like just crosswalk that, right? Like,
well, and we're going to do that as part of that mission is to others like NIS2.
The MSP 911 stuff. I don't think we would say no if we got a program director that wanted to spin it up somewhere in Europe that is willing to. It would just
introduce newer challenges for us.
Yeah.
The only problem is the flaw in my logic when I registered that domain name 3.5 years ago was that in other countries it's not 911. If you go to Italy, it's 118. Not 911. So we'll probably have to market it differently or give a different name to it.
Do shows like 911, like, did they
rebrand
them or do they just not show them? Or
that's our and I'm going to say it with tongue in cheek here, and I mean it like, you know, in all you know, just joking around, like our American arrogance.
Fair.
Yeah, they're used to that, right? So all of my family and friends in Italy, you know, I think they roll with that punch.
Yeah. But to your point, Pierre, we've had, I think, 3 calls from Europe during our initial charter, or at least not US centric, not like I think APAC was also included in that, but from that space. And we weren't able to help at that time. We just referred them off to other vendor partners.
There are a lot of privacy and other laws and stuff that I won't say no, right? I think you were a little more direct with no, but it would take somebody in Europe that could basically.
I'm using MSP GeekCon numbers of not year one. So just I'm only invoking not year one. I'm not saying no.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say from a visionary perspective, hell yes.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I agree.
Right? From a tactical perspective of where we are now, we're trying to get off our feet and stand and start walking a bit here. The reality is we're just not prepared for that yet. But Pierre, I certainly would like to be there. I'd like to expand my language skills to other languages that I don't know as well. So
I'm working on German. I've had 840 days.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Yeah, nur ein bisschen. But yeah, so wanted to also announce that we have a nameless. I'm not going to name them just for OPSEC reasons, but we do have a volunteer that is running all of our Microsoft multi-tenant organizations and our identity and access management. They are a practitioner that I trust a lot. Oh, thanks, Pierre. We will know where to find you. Hopefully you know where to find us when we're ready. No, I tease. We are going to be doing a volunteer management structure off of Patreon that allows us to start documenting and tracking these things. So we will have that structure in place. But we do have a volunteer that is donating their time to help us with managing all of our infrastructure, little though it may be, from a Microsoft Cloud perspective, and also separation of duties so that us as board members aren't the ones with admins. So you can't just attack Matt and Jason to get what you need for that. So Robert doesn't get attacked. Robert is the attacker usually. He's like Chuck Norris.
Godfather going there.
Yeah. All right. We're getting close to the end of this stream. I think really what we wanted to cover is that our birth was from CompTIA and GTIA. The ability for us to spin out and have our own C3 allows us to do things. And we didn't really cover this, but when we wanted to do boots on the ground, That was absolute no, again, to the point of delivering a direct service. This
Yep.
brings us back to a place where Jason could go get on a plane and go say, hey, I'd love to sit here and help you if we're in the worst case scenario, right? Or myself or Robert or other volunteers in that scenario. And so we are very, very happy. You're going to be at Beyond in Denver. I think I am always going to be at Beyond because of contractual reasons. So I will certainly be there. No, it's actually going to be awesome. And the security boot camp is going to be, or the security track is going to be fun. It's going to be very different.
Maybe I'll be there this year.
You never know. Like Jason, a wild Slagle could appear. I'd have to be in costume though. But yeah, so right? Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of. But no, we're here because of CompTIA. CompTIA is hopefully going to help us continue this mission from a financial. Yeah, GTIA. I guess that's like
the new rule is every time you call it CompTIA, you owe somebody a drink. So
yeah, man, that's gonna get expensive.
I was gonna say push-ups, but
yeah.
I can do push-ups. That's cheaper.
Push-ups are okay. Yeah,
that's better. I'll do push-ups. I'm down for that. That works. I can push this fat body up once or twice. If you're not already a Patreon member, please join. We do intend to make that the source of our volunteer management structure. We also plan on using it for some of the gating of the stuff we're going to share behind the scenes. I think if you're a Patreon member, we'll share financials fully. I'm not opposed to that. I don't know if this is the right forum to make that decision as a board member, but heck, it's pretty public. But I don't know that I'm opposed to sharing that. All right, second. Anybody want to make a final motion on this? Like, we good? Motion granted, it looks like. We'll probably share at least quarterly financials from there. Just to let you know, I intend for us to build up a bit of a kitty that allows us to do things like scholarships or funding of major challenges for an MSP, maybe even an incident in the worst case scenario if we needed to. So there's just neat stuff that we can do because of the tax status. The other thing I'd say is we have to be publicly supported in our charter. The way we're structured, it has to come from monthly membership. And so if you are a member of Patreon, even free, you are a part of the membership that we have to require to maintain for us to be an organization that we are. So thank you for joining there. Please find us there. And I think if nobody else has any questions, what he says, then I'll take care of my fair. Touche. Pierre's afraid.
At one point that was probably an inside joke, but it's so public now that
it is very public.
Yeah.
Isn't that going to be funny? You're going to be looking at Webster's and there's going to be a term for badge stealing. And it's just going to be a picture of your like silhouette. It's just going to be Slagle.
It has jumped the shark a little bit when I bought a badge printer.
Yeah, it is a good jump the shark reference even in that regard. To your point, does that mean you're done, Jason? Do I have this here?
I can't claim that I'm done, but
it'll have to be a pretty one to go after.
Yeah,
is the point.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Very good. Well, anyways, y'all, thanks for being here. I hope this update was valuable.
About 9 minutes. We'll be on Zoom. I'll probably hop in 5. I have to reset that laser over there for the next 6 geese I'm printing.
I'm glad you finished that up because you could have just ended on the next 6 geese.
Yeah.
And like it would have been a laser and geese. We'd have to do our own contextualization of what that means.
No. So. They are prizes for an MSP Geek event next week. So
you're not severing the heads off geese. No. So that's good with lasers. That's a much better outcome.
That's not
See you over in Zoom in about 5 minutes.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
All right.